Hi, folks. One of our members on our forum at Flexway Exchange, George 3636, experienced scoring of his Anilox roll after one use, and he's asking us, what happened. And I thought about it, and I thought, scoring is such a big problem that I'd want to cover a lot of information with as little writing as possible. So I made this presentation. Okay, guys. So here we go. Alright, this is what the surface of an Anilox roll looks like when it has scored, and I'm sure all of you have seen this, right, to one degree or another. And when you print with a roll that's like that, you get these lines here, these dark lines, okay? So this is what a good Anilox surface looks like, okay, all nice and uniform. You see the shiny spots at the bottom of the cells, it's clean cells. Now in this picture here on the left, you see a mild score where you see some shiny and the walls are getting thicker because it's worn there. And here it's even worse. This is a severe score, okay? Alright, so that's what scoring looks like, and that printed image is what it prints like. So what causes scoring? Okay? Basically, scoring is caused by hard particles wedged under or embedded into the leading edge of a doctor blade. Like, sometimes we use plastic doctor blades, and bits of metal or hard stuff can get embedded into the leading edge of those. Some of the particles that get stuck can be blade slivers due to excessive blade pressure, even slivers and fragments just from normal wear, right? I mean, the blades do wear. I've heard that inferior blade materials can be a source of particles for scoring. I've never experienced that. I don't know how I would see it, but I've heard that. And that improperly ground ink can also have hard particles in it that can cause scoring. Okay. And finally, you can get hard particles from a variety of miscellaneous sources from all over the place. Okay. So, for example, underneath the unwinding area where the roll is unwinding, you could have dirt and debris on the floor that actually jumps up to the substrate due to static and travels to the print station on the web, starting to deposit onto the plate and then onto the ink system, the hard particles. You could get metal just from normal wear. As the machine is running, you've got little fragments of metal that happen during wear and stuff like that, and that can travel through the press on the web. You can have your Anilox rolls, the ends start to chip, okay, and that's very hard. And otherwise, particles allowed into the environment. We walk into plants, we bring stuff in on our shoes, the trucks pull up to the delivery door, dust blows into the plant, that sort of things. And then you have, when we use hoses, air hoses, to blow the press area clean. I mean, it looks real nice. It's beautiful when we blow the press clean, but all of that blows a bunch of dust up into the air that ends up getting into our equipment and possibly into our ink systems and that sort of thing. Okay. Uncovered print stations. I've walked around. I've seen a lot of times operators don't cover their print stations. Well, you get particles introduced that way. Stuff that falls onto. So even when we use chambers, we often have a drip pan, right? And that drip pan is sometimes run into the ink sump, return with a hose. It returns. Well, you have particles and stuff falling onto that drip pan. It can get into the ink system that way. Uncovered ink buckets, sitting there, can get stuff kicked into them or dust blown into them and that sort of things. Cleaning tanks, when sometimes we have tanks where we can clean the gears of our Aniloxes or parts, or even give the Aniloxes a cleaning themselves, or even our sonic cleaning stations. When they have particles in them, that can return to our ink and end up wedged in our doctor blade. Okay. Storage of ink hoses. Okay. Sometimes we have contaminated flush solutions. You flush your hoses out and you store your hoses with the opens end up. And, sometimes the hoses have dips. They might just be wrapped up and put somewhere. That can keep liquid particles and stuff from draining out of the hoses. Okay. So I recommend storing the hoses hanging from one end straight if possible, with the other end suspended above a drip tray. That way you have a straight hose that is just letting the ink and or the solution and any particles just drip out of it. Okay. Avoiding a scoring. How to avoid scoring? You have to take a comprehensive approach. Okay, you have to check your inks out. Check them to see if there's any particles in them. Check them with a strainer. See if you have any metal in there. Use magnets. See if you have metal in there. Pour your solvent through a coffee filter. See if you catch any particles, and check your additives and stuff like that. Okay. Check your whole system, everything that can possibly introduce particles into the ink system. Think about it, okay? Develop practices throughout the entire system that help keep contaminants out of ink. Filter your inks in line when you use a pump. If you can incorporate a filter into that so that it's constantly filtering the inks, that's a great thing. Don't change your filters or your magnets during your run, because you can loosen up stuff and introduce whatever the filters or magnets catch, right? And reintroduce it into the system. If you do have a drip pan just for catching drips, not one that needs to return to a pump, but that's just for catching drips, have it drip into a separate bucket. And if you happen to catch a spill or something like that, strain it before returning it to your ink sump, okay? And keep your ink sumps covered. Besides avoiding particles, it also helps reduce your evaporation for water-based and solvent-based inks. And if you're using cleaning tanks or sonnet tanks, you might want to consider filtering them in line so that you don't have particles sticking onto the surface of your Anilox rolls and being introduced to the ink system or getting onto the Dr. Blade right away after you're done cleaning. Monitor your brake rotor and unwind components as potential sources of contamination. You'd be surprised if you put a piece of paper, clean paper, under your brakes, under your chucks, and those sort of things where you're unwinding, you might catch little particles of metal or asbestos or something that can get, or even ceramic, that can get introduced through the paper, through the web, onto and into the ink system. Okay, so keep the floor under the unwind roll clean of dust. Watch to see if static is pulling up the debris, and instead of blowing air to clean up your area, try using a vacuum instead, and maybe even a damp cloth, so you're sucking particles away and sticking particles to damp cloth so they're not being blown around. Okay. If possible, use a web cleaner. Sometimes you can't use a web cleaner on some materials or wide web situations, but when possible, try to use a web cleaner to avoid getting stuff into the ink system. Don't use steel wool or brass wool or anything like that to clean parts. Okay, use a type of if you have to use an abrasive pad, make it a nylon one, for example. Rinse parts with fresh water or solvent after you clean them in a soaking tank. The soaking tank can have particles in it. You want to make sure that you rinse any particles that might have stuck onto the roller or to the parts. Okay. Like I said earlier, hang the hoses by one end with the other open and down towards a drip tray so everything drips out of it. Wipe all your parts clean to remove residue immediately before you put them in your press. When you're going to put your Anilox in, give it a final nice little wipe down. Make sure that everything, your pans, your chambers, everything has wiped down so that you don't introduce hard particles into your ink system. Use stainless steel plumbing, for example. It could be as complex as you have a solvent system that runs to and from your machine, and you have a very large wide web situation with an auto flush situation and that auto wash situation. If you use galvanized pipe or something like that, you can be introducing rust into the system without knowing it. So check that. Pour some and filter it and see if you've got any rust particles in there. Fittings on drums and that sort of things. Maybe make them stainless so they're not introducing rust. Okay. Use plastic safety can maybe. Think about that. The metal cans can introduce rust particles and that sort of thing. So Plastic cans avoid that. Okay, and when you remove your chambers, inspect your blades for damage, for nicks, or for odd wear. Okay, and inspect your Anilox rolls for chipped ends. See if they're getting chipped, and document those chips so that you can keep count as they start to happen. Okay, now as for parts and tooling and stuff like that, wear is normal. You're going to have metal filings generated. Okay, so monitor cleaning systems that have recirculating solution and that sort of thing, or even stagnant solution. Monitor them and inspect them for contamination. Cover bearings and journals when you're deep cleaning if they're on there, if applicable. You don't want to blast stuff onto your bearings and have your bearings be introducing contamination into your system. Inspect your bearings at every opportunity and replace them when they're worn, when they're slipping or loose, or when you feel like they're sticking. Okay, so anytime you take out a roller or plate cylinder or anything like that that has a bearing on it, inspect it to make sure that it's in good condition. Have spares on hand and a removal tool so that you're not hesitant to replace them as the need comes up. And if necessary, investigate whether there's a type of Loctite product that might be helpful to you. Okay, Loctite makes different kinds of joint compounds. Some keep bearings from turning, some hold them in and resist removal but allow it, and that sort of thing. So if you're having a persistent problem with bearings spinning free, that might be something for you to look at. Okay, and finally, just a couple of thoughts. Again, I want to remind you to take a very comprehensive approach to this. Think like a particle. Think like you are a particle that wants to get on that Dr. Blade and wants to score that Anilox roll. How might you have gotten to that point? Think of every possible way that a particle might get to a Dr. Blade and scratch an Anilox roll surface. And keep at it. Don't let your guard down. Keep an eye on these scores. Monitor them for scoring. And you can even document the distance of scores on your various rolls, for example, if you wanted to, and say from the gear side it's 5.5 inches in and another one is 7 3/4 inches in, from example, so that you can monitor over time how frequently these scores are happening and where they are. Okay, so anyhow, I hope this helped a little bit, and I hope you have a great day.